written up for, like on these prints.
And I would think you'd have the same thing in each state. Inside the states.
Huh?
Regions to, so maybe it's not, maybe the right word isn't structure, but composition, or is it structure?
Okay, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. Don't close it off.
No, I'm giving some hard thought.
Maybe we repeat that down at the state level.
Is, I think Bill made a point yesterday before we close off. Do we want to really break it down to an individual state by state thing, or is it well enough to talk about just a regional structure? And I think one of the things that Bill was arguing was that with most of the work, at least in the environmental sector, now being done and thought about in terms of ecosystem or watershed planning, that maybe talking about individual state representation and may lead to some of the same problems that exist now, just because of the states kind of act as artificial barriers. Well, I think more than trying to cut it up geographically right now, we don't need to do that. I think philosophically what we need to do is to decide whether or not it makes sense to talk about, as I think the first group did yesterday, although unfortunately I was trying to scribble with mine and I wasn't in on the discussion. You know, it sounded like what you're talking about was each state individually would then elect or put representatives into a regional structure, and then the regional structure would have representatives then to a larger, you know, basin-wide alliance. And is my question is having a state structure or representation on that basis what you want to do?
That's not what our group did.
Okay.
Our group talked about keeping it upper, middle, lower basin, region oriented, not state oriented, like, you know, regional
So what's the
oriented.
question he's asking?
Oh, I think we should.
Should
Is that
it be
the question?
state or-
That's my answer.
No, the question should it be
States?
state oriented or regional oriented?
Region oriented, with representation from the regions.
And I don't know that we need to say which states belong to what regions or how many. I guess I'm just talking about overall whether or not adding another level, which would be an individual state representation, makes sense in the context of the overall structure. And I don't know.
I think that this, we're looking, I mean, I don't know, I'm sorry that I'm late in the structure, I want to brush my teeth.
We're glad you did, Harry.
Thank you, I know, I knew everybody would be. And so, I mean, I think part of our whole philosophy is that we don't want to just be bound by our boundaries. Part of the whole thing is to think more as one family along the river. And so to begin to do that, we need to do regions rather than states, so people begin to see that, you know, the lower basin, hopefully people will feel more connected, and in the middle and in the upper, and then all of us will feel more one, you know, unity along the whole thing. But if we keep that state thing, I think it'll bring out more of that turf stuff to me. It seems to me, but I don't know. I don't know what my other colleagues have said here, but that's just kind of my feel for it. What do you think?
How do you define the regions too? Somehow to divide the different watersheds? Does that mean what region?
I don't know, Bill had mentioned yesterday that he felt that there were basically 7, and I think he used ecosystems that would be in the alliance, and I don't know how those break down and where the individual individual states fall in terms of that. But I would suggest that things probably would not look a whole lot different, it seemed to me, than the way we've kind of broken them down in the regional meetings now, because I think it was a consensus in St. Louis that there were some real reasons why people that are here today would come together, people in the middle would come together in upper.
Together. I think a big recommendation for the next group behind us should be that there should be a map. I am very visually oriented, and I think that we should be able to look at the states and how we can try to divide them up. Don't you think so? I mean, really, because I don't think all of us know geography as well as we like. And not only that, just by looking at it visually gives you more of a sense of, how you might want to, I think he said watersheds, actually, 7 watersheds, I think is what he was talking about besides ecosystems.
That's what I heard.
Watersheds. So I must be like, I'm still in kindergarten. I want to be like, would you mind showing me that, please? And you guys probably got all that in your head. So it would be better if you have a physical map for everybody. And like that, it makes you feel more unified. That's part of it. Perhaps a little bit.
Now, one of the other things that I think we talked about, and this is, maybe it's getting away, but I think we're going to be kind of cut short on time here, is the whole other issue of paid staff, and how does that work? Do we set up an office? Do we find a place for a staff within an existing organization? And I guess the first question then is there a necessity for paid staff?
I think that was the consensus.
Absolutely. I think everybody in every group agreed on that, don't you think? Where's the rest of Yes. Come sit down, Zeb, and join in. Or stand and join in. I know what you mean. That's what I figured once I sat down, I had to participate, huh?
So far, and we've had some people come in, just to go back over what we basically came to was that, and kind of going back up, is that there be a regional structure, that the individual regions were allowed to define their own structure and the composition of their membership and the representation on the board of directors, but the board of directors overall must reflect the diversity of interests and issues basin-wide. That there'd be 2 regional meetings per year in each region. That there would be an annual meeting of the membership or of representatives from the regions, that, depending on money and everything, if people couldn't attend, if there wasn't membership, proxies or something like that could be put in. But that at that annual meeting there would be a fairly broad agenda or a work plan that would be defined, that would be the parameters for action by the board of directors. Maybe the one then, that's kind of a broad structure. The other thing that everybody talked about was day-to-day kind of management and the necessity of an executive committee to handle more emergency type of things, and maybe we should just spend a little bit of time on each one of those.
That's what we're looking for.
Okay.
Paid staff in place, because this could be so crucial to the entire operation, in terms of keeping us all together. I'm not thinking of it so much in terms of a decision-making body, but in terms of a body that coordinates the whole region,
Administrative stuff.
constantly dispenses information throughout the whole region and gets information back in that would enable an executive board to make a decision that would reflect the wishes of the region. So, it would seem to me that for your paid staff, that they do need a place. I don't know that it'd be fair to talk about putting them in, say with me, or anybody else, considering the space that Lynn has, the job they've got to do already. They need their own space, they need their own telecommunications equipment, because it would seem to me that would be almost their major role, that kind of thing.
one of the things that has been done in SOG is that the Center for Rural Affairs has basically taken over the role of acting as kind of the administrative liaison, so that they will provide the facility a space for the person, and actually will use their staff, and then 5% out of any grant that has been raised for the organization goes to the center for administrative overhead. And one of the things that they've done, I think it's a real cost saving mechanism, because when you start talking about space and computers and telephones and fax machines and all of that, it's very expensive.
And there are ways to break out all of those costs and keep them separate.
Let me just check in, how close are y'all to being done? I realize this is
Couple
almost the
months.
whole group. I know, he said a couple of years, so you're getting close.
It's like 3 days.
3 days. Are you almost there? Okay.
5 minutes.
Okay,
Okay.
but it also raised a point for us that we talked about, and maybe we can define how that looks somewhere down the road. I mean, if it's going to be, in somebody's existing space or office or whatever. But do we need a paid staff per region? I think that's a question.
I think so.
Or do we need just one for the entire base?
I think
Well, I
it'd be
think
At a
that-
minimum, you need one
Yeah,
for the base.
but at best,
I
you
think
need
that you
to
need to define what this person's, what needs to be done by your paid staff, and then begins to tell you how many paid staff you need.
Well,
I'm thinking in terms of the person who's gonna get out the newsletter, not four times a year, but more often in a newsletter that's gonna have information for the whole region, so that everybody in the region knows what's going on throughout the region. There might be little bulletins, updates, keeping us aware of legislation, current legislation, and, national legislation. I'm assuming that there'd be a state structure that would deal with the state legislation. I don't know, I could just see a person who could be very, very busy doing just this kind of thing, and then sending out questionnaires. I
One
could see.
person with a big travel budget instead of too many people to start. And no other way for them to come
I'm just
Yes.
gonna say,
Yeah.
and no lights
Person
on
has
that.
to be single.
That's a lot, that's a big task, just that's a big task. We're
And
talking a lot
I
of
think that if
states
the
to
alliance is
coordinate.
really gonna work, you're gonna need that kind of communication, between all the bases.
I think that's not too much large a task, than for one person to at the beginning, we're not
Just get it going.
Just to get started. That's a dream.
I think I'll just put
Okay.
down, I think the consensus is if we can raise enough money, that it would be preferable to have a staff per region. And let's talk, then maybe just to wrap it up so we can kind of get it, I think the one missing gap here is, okay, we've kind of got a annual work plan that the board of directors must follow. I guess we didn't ask the other question, will the paid staff have day-to-day decision-making authority?
They have to.
Okay.
They couldn't function.
So then the next, I guess the missing thing is the executive committee, and, I get, what does that look like? And what are they empowered to do?
Well, we don't have to get too micro on that. I think at this point, if Mary leaves our queen, she gets to make all the decisions.
That's right, queen of recycling, but I don't know what that carries over to
How
you
silly of me
students.
to even ask the question.
You don't even know how all that came about. It all came about from a recycled pen. Just about fitting in.
So if we just say executive committee empowered to make, a kind of, monthly or emergency
Yeah,
decisions.
emergency and sort of routine major expenditure decisions and stuff like that.
Yeah, and if we go to the point, if we had like
Yeah.
interstate litigation or things
Staff
like
should-
that, I mean,
yeah.
that had to be done by the executive committee things
The
that were.
staff should like be empowered to buy Mr. Coffee. Executive committee should be-
And it's to make sure that you're on track in between your annual meeting.
That's right.
Or portion.
Okay.
Portion.
Did they need to meet, monthly or? As needed.
as needed. I don't think that I don't think we'll have a budget to do that.
Telephone conference calls.
Yes, conference calls.
Quarterly, you'll look it up.
Okay. Is that the broad picture, so we can turn it back over?
A real concerted effort in all of this is to look for individuals and groups to bring into the process. And that needs to be a very important function. It's like,
In the executive committee,
I'm talking about the organization itself.
Yeah, I'm just assuming that you're going to have at least one representative from each region, or maybe that's what it is.
It's an ongoing effort is to look for new groups and issues and people to pull in to make sure that this is a representative that's continuing, reflective of what's going on in the needs of the basin. Because obviously we're not conditioned to include all people need to get included, if ever. Yeah, it's an authorized break.
That is an unauthorized break. I don't know, we're just gonna have to.
We can hear, go ahead.
What?
We're used to
No,
that.
it's real important that you
You
come
have to
join
buy
us.
into the circle.
Right.
You have to be in the circle, you gotta.
Good at Bill. If you wanna get started by introducing. Maybe we could start out this morning, we do have some new folks that have joined us, but we could also remind ourselves after a late night out, what happened, who we are. So if you could just say who you are and what organization you're with. I'll start. I'm Dianne Russel. I work with the Institute for Conservation Leadership. I'm out of Washington, D.C. And I do meeting facilitation and leadership development training, and strategic planning, board development, and things with folks in the movement, folks in the environmental movement, however you define that.
Willie Fontenot with Louisiana Attorney General's office. I'm on the lean board, and my job is to work with individual groups, help organize, and spend a lot of time working with the media, developing storage, work with groups across the United States.
Bethany Anderson from the Leech Lake Reservation in northern Minnesota, and I'm with the Indigenous Environmental Network, and we do a broad range of very different issues throughout this country. But primarily I'm working on a nuclear power plant issue in Minnesota.
I'm Bill Wenzel, as I said yesterday, I'm currently semi-retired. Most recently with the American Farmland Trust as regional coordinator of their sustainable ag programs. Most of my emphasis was on doing on-farm demonstration and research in alternative agriculture practices, working to change legislation toward that end, and also working with small nonprofits who are being established in order to promote sustainable ag practices.
Romana Stevens, I'm field liaison for Lean. I work with groups across the country. My husband and I also run a consulting business, and so that takes it broader, so we work environment full-time.
Audrey Evans, Community Outreach Coordinator at the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic.
I'm Robert Wiygul. I'm an attorney with the Sierra Club Legal Defense Fund, so I'm a public interest lawyer type.
Formerly corporate interest lawyer type.
So that's why he does so well with the other type. Plus he dances really well.
I'm Pat Mahan. I'm with Lean, and I'm recording this
You forgot my
session.
modesty, my famous modesty.
That's right.
I'm Bill Davis. I'm Executive Director of Citizens for a Better Environment. We work in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois, and I'm also the chairman of the board of the Environmental Support Center.
Okay. I'm Mary Lee Order, Executive Director of Louisiana Environmental Action Network.
I'm Zeb Mayhew with Oak Alley Plantation, which is one of the antebellum homes on the Mississippi River between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. We're right in the middle of a major green belt that we're trying to preserve, and been active trying to do that and bring some sense to the way we develop our river corridor in the reason.
Fighting Formosa.
Yes.
Formosa's the main challenge at the moment, but there will be others.
I'm Dan Nicolai, and I'm the environmental coordinator for the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers, Local 4620. And I work with a new nonprofit called the Louisiana Labor Neighbor Alliance, which is not new, but it just got incorporated. So I'm sorry I couldn't come yesterday.
He was the one doing the hazmat training yesterday.
We said praise Monday.
Okay, thanks.
I'm Florence Robinson from Headwaters, Cancer Alley in Allison. And my community represents virtually every environmental problem that you can raise, all the way from wetlands and conservation issues to issues of labor, right on down to the poisoning of people.
My name is Darryl Stevens. I'm a lean board member. Also run a consulting firm that doing consulting work for lawyers and environmental groups. And we basically specialize in air quality and water quality.
Now, if you ever get questioned about whether you're a dedicated environmentalist, just tell people that you were at a meeting on a Sunday morning, some of you here at 8. I was getting up this morning going, this kid's gonna go play all day and I'm going to a meeting. What's this mean? We have a little bit of work to do just for those of you that have joined us. A lot of what we did yesterday was to focus on those things, the goals. Overall goals. Focused on the goals for the session. By identifying some issues of common as opposed to a typical conservation or only environmental approach. We did some storytelling about our groups, and we also did that activity on the back wall that you all participated in this morning already, just to kind of get a picture of who we are, who we work with, what kinds of resources. And then we also spent some time in small groups talking about possible alliance strategies. And for both of these pieces, we're going to be revisiting that this morning. We've already had some small group work to do that. 2 points that came out yesterday that I just were discussion points. One is the question of how funders affect or don't affect, mainly affect, I think there was a concern around that, how they affect the formation of the alliance and the alliance's agenda. And we very strongly affirm that we want to be the ones that decide what the alliance does, and then we'll find where to get resources. And if funders want to be part of driving the agenda, we don't really want to participate with that. And the second question that was raised that we reached agreement on was the question of whether to involve industry in the group at this point in the formation stage with the alliance. And again, there's a very strong, there's one person that really wanted to raise the question and have it brought forward, and I think we had a pretty good discussion, but there's a very strong consensus that we need to form the alliance with nonprofit and advocacy folks before we begin inviting labor. And I think Willie did a not labor, industry.
Management.
Industry, government were the
Yeah, right.
I apologize.
She's just looking at you and was thinking labor.
Yeah, and it's Sunday morning.
You
for God's
thought you
sake.
were gonna be in for a short meeting, didn't you?
Dan was like,
Hello,
"Goodbye." I'm out of here. No, with industry and government. And the sense was, and I think Willie did a fine job of giving us an image, was why should we throw ourselves into the lion's den if we don't understand what their weapons are and what their claws are, and it's obviously not an equal situation at this point. So I think, again, the group very much affirmed that decision. So that's where we were yesterday. And this morning what we're going to do, 2 small groups work to pull off what came out of small groups. We asked the questions yesterday, what's already happening, just to get each other on board. And we also asked the questions, what could some barriers be? And I think those barriers we haven't really focused on a lot, but they filtered through our thinking as we've thought about strategies. And then in particular, we talked about what issues could be addressed by the Alliance. So one small group's going to present kind of a consensus or a summary and a recommendation that we would take to a meeting that's going to follow this meeting. They're going to be, just to give you a quick broad picture, 2 more meetings, the upper meeting and the middle meeting, and then we're going to have a meeting in October that pulls together representatives from each of the regions and tries to hammer out some recommendations about issues and structure for the Alliance and how to go forward with it. And then the second group will focus on strategies and structure. So, group 1, I know you have it all written
Do it,
up. You're
Robert.
very
Darryl?
prepared.
Do it, Robert.
Oh, they're so.
So I presume, pointing our fingers at one another. Okay, the common issues that we pulled out of these things over on the wall over here, one that seemed to get.
Makes a better picture.
Exactly. The common issue.
Very good. A whole new career opening up.
Okay, the common issues that jumped out at us were the one that seemed to get the most play was sustainable economic development as a component of that sustainable agriculture. Education relating to environmental issues and social justice issues with the goal of building communities across all ethnic and other barriers along the river. And third was toxics, which included the environmental health issues that everyone identified. The recommendations felt like the association should have a proactive platform, one that emphasizes advocacy for the whole river corridor, which would include, but not be limited to, economics, political action, zero discharge, protection of habitat, protection of cultural resources, and toxics. Questions? Okay.
Thank you, Vanna.
Comments?
Well, it just seemed to me that one of the pivotal kind of concerns may not be addressed in there is ethnic.
Environmental waste, wasn't it?
Environmental waste.
No, that comes under the social justice.
That's, we
Okay.
felt like that came,
Okay.
yeah. Now, that can be
Right, Florence?
articulated more
It would
fully
fall
when
under
this
the
is
social
typed up.
justice. Environmental and social.
social
Yeah.
justice, yeah.
That's where it falls under.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Yeah, we got Chair Fraser.
We need to go.
No kidding?
Yeah. Then a hush came up on the land.
Really? Thought you were leaving at 10.
It's 10:15, but through the process, it's about what, 9:45, 5 to 10, is it? Quarter to 10.
Do you want Darryl to take you? We could play something really good.
If that would really help.
We can take, we've
Could-
got a
Could you
vehicle.
take, Darryl, could you
If
take
you
him?
could take us, that'd allow us.
That would give him probably an hour more.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's only 20 minutes away. You're
Okay.
Yeah, that would
Darryl,
give
can you
us.
take him? Do you mind? You could even take the lean mobile? Okay, thank you.
The lean
Press, we
mobile.
got a lean mobile. Batman's got Batmobile.
The lean mobile, okay.
It's a little dented, but it goes.
Doesn't have a window,
Then he'll lean.
thanks to
Join
you.
us.
So come join us.
Yeah, you
Get
gotta
you-
get
we promise
inside
we'll
the
get you to
circle.
that plane on time.
Get Bill in, get himself.
And if you could introduce yourself, Bill, while you're sitting down.
Somebody broke my thing.
Somebody,
The person that's got it in his hand.
It was in his pocket.
Could you tell us who we are?
Pardon me?
Could you introduce yourself to the group? We got some new folks.
Yes, we have 2 new people,
We
we'll
have
just
two
do
people
it.
here, right here.
And that they'll
I've
introduce
already
themselves to you.
introduced, they know who I've introduced myself about half an hour ago.
Bill,
Okay.
Ben,
I'm warning you for posterity, Bill.
Okay,
If that
thank
plane
you.
doesn't make it, we want you to have it on
Okay,
tape.
your queenship is absolutely. My name is Bill Redding. Yes. I have been the coordinator for the Alliance and subject to her queenship here.
Gonna be trouble.
We're gonna have to call a break here.
Mhm.
We're not careful, Bill.
I think I'll pitch the limousine out.
I say that with the utmost affection. I hope folks understand that. Let me clean this up.
Really?
With love and affection.
Okay, what the issues group has presented. Any other comments? Are there any concerns about what they presented? Do you feel like it really represents what came out of the small groups? And are you willing to see this go on as a recommendation to the next level?
Well, I think it's good for the group down here because we've all, me as a northerner, now understand what you're talking about and what this really means. But I think it's very important that when the summary comes out and goes to people in the middle and the upper river, that it's spelled out in much more
More defined.
concrete
Yeah, me
terms
too.
so
Yeah.
that
Translated
so that
a
it's
lot more.
understandable.
Right.
Yeah, we
Um,
certainly agree with that.
The people around the room understand it, but I can tell you,
They will get
They
it.
won't.
they
Okay.
won't,
They won't.
because I've been around the environmental and agricultural movement for a number of years, and I didn't understand what you were talking about when I first walked into the room yesterday.
Well, then maybe we need to take some northerners on some toxic tours of their communities, my God. It's there.
They've agreed to that.
Same problem, yeah.
They've agreed to that. Look at this.
You gotta join the circle and you gotta introduce yourself.
It's a circle.
You gotta, well, it's a semicircle, I guess. Closest we get into it.
Okay, well, and I'm John Liebman, and I'm 11 years old.
You gotta do more than that,
And
darling.
I'm Darryl Stevens' only friend. Shall we go farther?
Tell them what you, some people here don't know you. Tell them
Yeah,
what you do.
no, I guess. I, up until January 15th, worked for Greenpeace, and in 1989 was the Mississippi River Coordinator for all 10 states. So I sort of feel a vested interest in what y'all are doing, because I've been up and down the river myself, which is where I've met a lot of you.
Are you
More
back
Romana?
in? Are you back in love again? You got here late.
I've been trying to track him down way before this meeting, and he didn't get the message about the meeting. He just got a message I was looking for him. So I wasn't able to find him in time to get him here from Austin for yesterday. But he's gonna have to tell the rest of it why he's not here.
Then I got stuck in the mud all the way up to my doors. In Lake Charles, trying to do my one good deed for the month, which was trying to help a woman fix a flat tire. And as I pulled off the road to get out of the way, I ended up in more trouble than she did. And got here last night about 9:30, and was in no mood nor any shape to deal with any of you, so I just sort of tucked myself away until things got better.
Well, we're glad you're back, John. We're
Well,
glad
I'm
you
driving
showed up.
again. Looking at the damage to my van this morning, I'm not in a real good mood, but things are better. I'm back in Louisiana for the first time since the last meeting you guys had.
Which was in May.
May, that's right. Thank you, John.
Well, welcome.
Thanks.
Glad you're with us. Okay, so we were just looking at things that came out of the small group summaries, and we were asking the pointed question of, can you live with this? And Bill had suggested that we put a little more detail to it.
Not having been here yesterday, does this speak to the issue of the need for more master planning of what's going on in the river corridor? Was that, is that
The
included
economic
in here? Is that
development?
between the lines? Is that in the economic development portion?
You mean
Well, I
in terms
just
of
mean,
land use?
yeah, looking at sort of evaluating what you've got.
Yeah, I certainly
And-
think
Yes.
and,
that would be a
and
necessary
not doing
component
this
of that.
unbridled, is my way of expressing this unbridled development, especially in our area, is so much more of a problem. Just every piece of land that looks like a prime industrial site, regardless of who lives near it or what cultural resources or other, economic alternatives might exist in the area, we just keep slapping plants everywhere and destroying, the, quality of life, and really taking away the economic alternatives for the future. So that's in the economics.
The answer is yes.
Good, okay, I just wanted to.
Did you explain, Diane, that this is, the first meeting in the series?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And this,
Kind of laid out what we did
this is what we're
yesterday.
gonna lay out to the folks when we have the, 2 additional meetings and regions that as the people in the lower river, this is how they view things. And so, of course, it's always open to put something in there, but development is a very, very big component up and down the road.
Okay. So we can look.
Except the first 8 counties.
But,
Development is not a factor in the first 8 counties other than the first 400-mile stretch. For the Mississippi Headwaters Board,
Right.
which is made up of 8 counties and county commissioners from those 8 counties.
of which you're the
And
only
real
activist on,
stringent zoning
you're the only
laws.
activist on that board.
I'm not on the board, I'm a citizen advisory committee
Yeah.
member. But it kind of protects that stretch of river from even from Billy Collins,
Okay.
it's actually have to be
And
set
Lake-
back like 150 feet from the river.
Is it correct that there aren't any native people living in Lake Itasca? Lake Itasca?
That's in the Mystic State Park.
Yeah, that's what I know. But there still aren't any native people, of course not.
Adjacent to, it's adjacent to the
Adjacent,
White
right.
Reservation.
Right. It's Lake Itasca.
Okay, and I guess we're really, I know Florence is gonna do a great job of summarizing that, making sure that, you will, I know you will.
Yeah, she took great notes yesterday.
I know, I saw. So, how about, the other piece we need to look at is what came up with folks that were working on the questions of structure, I know that's also due, because they were taking notes. Who wants to, from that small group, fill us in on what you decided, what you're recommending?
Maybe since I'm probably the only one to read my handwriting, I'll kind of take over. I think this part, and we pretty much looked at the commonality of issues and then tried to spell them out in a little more detail and maybe even prioritize some of the things. I think the strategies were pretty straightforward. The 3 or 4 groups that worked on them yesterday, I think we're all pretty united in what the strategies were going to be as far as what the function of the alliance and the kind of things that we were going to get involved in would be. First of all, we talked about the real need for doing network and information sharing, just general communications within the membership organizations of the alliance. Some of the specifics of that could be a newsletter, a real need for an information clearinghouse, the necessity to, if at all possible, if the resources are there, to look at a computer network, potentially a bulletin board, and a database. But primarily, I think we're talking about the resource sharing and the information and communicating with each other and making sure everybody along the basin knows what's going on everywhere else. I think we felt that was something that we could begin to do almost immediately without requiring a lot of resources or assets. The next general broad area was that there should be some collective action in the alliance that would involve a legislative / lobbying effort in areas that were important, the need to do protests and actions, and also programmatically that we could work together not only on very broad basin-wide issues, but that some of the resources and expertise within individual nonprofits, member nonprofits, could help in local problem areas. The next broad area that we talked about would be initially education. We looked at it in two different ways. Education within the group, it was felt that there needed to be more than just information sharing. That what we needed to do was that the people, because of various areas of expertise, really needed to take an active role in educating other members of the Alliance, so that we got a much broader picture of things that we should be working on and could take on that role. And somewhere down the road, once that we were had much more resources and were better organized, that we could then do more of a public education that would involve things like the workshops, conferences, involvement with media schools, and just general public education. Lastly, on our list of priorities was litigation. And that there might be a possibility that if the resources come together, and once we get solidified, that litigation may be a very powerful tool for the Alliance. But the general overall consensus, and I don't know if it fits in with strategies in particularly, was that the most important priority was to getting the house in order of the Alliance, getting it structured, up and running, so that we can begin to do the work that we've outlined here. Then came the more difficult task, and we talked about the kind of struggle that we all were involved with late yesterday afternoon in the structuring, and came up with just some very broad kind of recommendations. We talked about basically, and I'm going to kind of jump in and work back, but a regional structure, and the regions yet to be defined, which was recommended. That is a very high priority that we need to, before the talk about the organization continues, we need to really define what those regions look like, and what are the criteria for the regions. But allowing the regions essentially to decide within themselves, once they are organized, the structure and the composition of their meeting would be to define an annual work plan, giving the board of directors some parameters within which they want it to work. And I think that fits pretty closely with the group before, talking about development of a proactive platform. I think that this is going to be a kind of an evolutionary process. It's going to change, as Mary Lee put it, we don't want to become very static and stay developing policies, that this is going to move and change as time goes by. And I think if we do an annual work plan, that fits with what the first group basically had to say. We felt that it was going to be very important that we have paid staff, and I think that was common in what was reflected in the discussions of all the groups yesterday. Hopefully that that we can have at least one per region, but it would be absolutely necessary to have at least one for the whole region right off, or the whole basin right off the bat. And those people would be empowered with day-to-day decision-making capability. The last piece that we talked about was kind of the middle piece, was the necessity of an executive committee that would have the authority to act for the overall alliance on emergency issues, disbursements, things that would come up in between the meeting of the board of directors or the annual meeting. And the only other part of that was that there needed to be at least one representative on the executive committee from each region.
Let's flip back to the first page and take it in each section, because I think they're very distinct. Questions first, clarifying questions, things that were said that you don't understand, that you'd like to have clarified on strategies.
Under education, what does that mean, that first thing done this way?
Oh, within the groups.
Other questions?
Just a comment, one of the things that I would throw in under litigation is not only instituting litigation, but coordinating litigation. Is there a bunch of us that are doing, permit litigation up and down the river? And if you coordinate that as far as what we ask for and so on.
Research is the foundation.
Just litigation?
Yeah,
Okay.
it goes with both of them.
It fits in both places, I think.
Okay. Any other comments?
Does fundraising belong in
Well, that's the whole thing that I think that's over in the structure. Because that's a big component of what needs to be addressed.
You're gonna raise all the money.
If I raise that type of money, I will open a hotel that will be Aruba, in Yucatan. Start my own environmental group.
That's right. Field Reading Support Center.
Don't say what.
Everybody missed it. I said, I thought we were getting it from
Nothing.
Don't open it.
Didn't get it that done.
I tried. Okay, any other comments about this?
Well, I guess I have a, is fundraising a strategy or is that a?
No, it's
structure?
Structure.
Right.
Without money.
Way too much.
That's right, you can't fight the
Okay, in
giants.
terms of what they've pulled out here from the small group reports, do you feel like this is good? It does summarize what came out of yesterday, and can you live with it in terms of taking it on as a recommendation? Does anybody feel like I have to stand up and say, no, I can't do it? Okay. All right, well, I think people have had enough coffee now that I can assume that they're not asleep. But let's go on to the next one then. Talk about
Pretty effective.
Yeah, I would
And
just.
I'm assuming that the reason for the 75 board members is that way staff can do anything they want because the board is going to be totally
No, it's
ineffectual.
because it's a coalition, and the way the coalition bylaws were set up, every organization gets a board member. And it drives staff crazy because,
Right.
of course, all 75 people don't show up, so they have a dramatically different board from meeting to meeting to meeting, depending on what turns up. And my
Yeah.
plea
Yes.
is to keep the number manageable.
Manageable.
For
Well, of
that.
course, you have
I
to.
don't think we discussed it, but I think the sense of it was, along with the kind of the discussion that we had yesterday, that that the regions would elect representatives to a board, which in and of itself would tend to keep the numbers smaller. But I don't think we spelled it
I
out.
think it has. If you go back and you read the summaries and what's been proposed in proposals, there are numbers. There are numbers for people. There are the number of 3 per region. And what we start out on an interim base is from St. Louis is 3 persons per region, right? The keepers. I mean, from the point, and then yesterday I brought up the idea of 3 people, 2 regional and one national person. So there has been numbers put out, and that would end up, as we progress, no more than 15 people. So there is a number.
Let me just ask in terms of keeping us moving here. And no matter what came out of St. Louis, we're recreating it anyway. From this
think expansion, not 1 year, but 5 years. 5 years to begin with. And in the year 1996, 97, what do we want this to look like? Mississippi, Basin Eco Region.
Let me get Zeb in here, cause he's had his hand, he's been very patient over there.
No, I was
11:35.
just to wait our turn. I just get the feeling that there's a sense that people understand that the watershed probably ought to encompass the whole watershed, but there seems to be concern whether that's manageable at this point. So really, it will be interesting to see what comes out of the other regional sessions, because the whole watershed is all part of the core. I mean, we're getting everything from there, so we should, but it is a lot to bite off. That anxiety, we've all tried so hard to do things even on smaller levels, and we understand the problems of getting it going, mostly fueled by the lack of funds.
That's what I'm thinking about. What is that's one thing, doing things, but what's manageable.
Yeah, if there were
The purpose and the mission statement will cover that, and it should articulate it, and that will be done once the 3 meetings are over. I've got faith it'll all work itself.
I do too.
Okay. One way or the other.
Let me just,
Yeah, what time are y'all?
yeah.
So how much time do you need before you actually leave, Bill? What time, how much time do you need before you can?
I'm all. I think all I need to do is go up and grab my bag.
It's
and I'm gone.
11:35.
Okay, let me just, before we move, are there any other comments about structure? I don't want to close this off.
I just want to make one, and that is, you're assuming eventually that everybody would come to one organization. The other possible structure is that all of the other rivers organize their own little piece, and you have a superstructure of alliances.
Okay.
And I think that's what we were saying.
Yeah. Correct.
How is membership defined?
It hasn't been yet.
Should that be noted as something that should be discussed?
Well,
Like we did about the regions?
yeah, I think I'd go back to what I
grab
said
some.
earlier, and what Kat talked about is that
You all know what I think.
membership was, the intention was to have it fairly open and representing the diversity of interest, but that there would be, along with the purpose and the mission statement, that there would be a set of principles that would be established. If people take a look at the principles and say, yeah, this is exactly something that we believe in, and we want to work with you, and we will accept those principles as our own, then they're open for membership. I think that's kind of summarizing what Pat says, and I thought that was an excellent idea.
And we would be the ones that would sit down and hammer out. Well, not
We
us.
as one region plus the other 2 regions, or
Yeah.
the 2 meeting groups? Where all
All
three
three,
basically
you
are
would-
doing the same thing.
Yeah, you do it all together.
I was gonna say you can run into some real
No,
regional
no,
problems
no.
if you try and work out of Louisiana and then talk to the non-organic farmers of Iowa.
Or we can all 3 come up with our own and then pull them together at the big meeting, but it has to be a together thing.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns or comments about structure? And is this something that you can move with as a recommendation to the next level of conversations that happen?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Then I think, I want to thank both groups, because I think you did a terrific job together. And we have folks folks departing and take a 10-minute break. And when we come back, what we're going to do is talk about next steps, especially for, I think, as we've identified from yesterday, reaching out to other people in the lower region that we want to be a part of it, what some of the steps are for that, and then talking about next steps in terms of follow-up from this meeting. And then the final piece, and I just want to see if I can all of you stay till like 11:10, 11:15? Because if we do that, it's very important, if you, all of you can, I know you can't, you can't either, you can stay, who can, if you can stay until 11:15, the evaluation of this session is going to be really